In King's Landing, Queen Cersei Lannister ignored every warning from the north, until thousands of terrified refugees proved the stories were true. At Harrenhal, the surviving lords learned a horrifying truth. Every death only made the Night King's army stronger. Now the army of the dead marches toward the last kingdom of men. Now the story continues. The first snowflakes reached King's Landing long before the dead ever did. At first, the people of the city welcomed them happily. Children ran through the streets laughing as the flakes drifted down from the gray sky above. Many of them had never seen snow before in their whole lives. To them it felt almost like magic. But the happy mood did not last long. The snow did not stop falling. Day after day it kept coming down harder and harder. The temperature dropped lower than anyone in the city could remember. The harbor slowly began to freeze over. Crops died in the fields all around the countryside. Food became harder and harder to find. Fear began spreading through the whole capital city. From high inside the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister watched the city struggle beneath the growing winter cold. The reports arriving from the north became more alarming with every single day that passed. Entire castles had simply vanished. Great noble houses had stopped answering messages completely. Refugees kept arriving by the thousands, bringing horrifying stories about frozen armies and monsters with glowing blue eyes. For the first time during her whole reign, Cersei began to doubt herself. But even now, she still refused to give up control of the city. She ordered the walls to be reinforced immediately. Every soldier available was called into service right away. Scorpions, which were giant crossbows, were mounted all along the battlements. The hidden stores of wildfire buried beneath King's Landing were dug up and prepared for use. Meanwhile, Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen finally arrived with what remained of the northern armies. What was left of the unsullied soldiers, the Northmen and other scattered forces from across Westeros gathered just outside the city gates. The sight of them shocked the people of King's Landing deeply. These were not victorious armies returning home from a great war. They were survivors. Exhausted, wounded, and deeply haunted survivors. The men who had escaped Winterfell looked as though they had already witnessed the end of the entire world. Inside the throne room, an uneasy council gathered together. Cersei sat upon the Iron Throne while Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, Davos, and the remaining lords of Westeros stood before her. Nobody in that room fully trusted anyone else. Old wounds and old betrayals still lingered heavily between them. But all of those differences seemed completely meaningless now. The Night King was coming and nothing else mattered anymore. Jon stepped forward and spoke to the room. He told them exactly what was waiting for them beyond the walls. He described the endless army, the White Walkers, the Ice Dragon, and the terrible fall of Winterfell. He spoke about Bran's death and the ancient knowledge the Night King had stolen. Every single word he spoke made the room grow quieter and quieter. Even the most stubborn lords in the room could no longer deny that the truth was real. Then a horn sounded loudly from somewhere outside the city. Everyone rushed toward the battlements at once. Far beyond the walls, through the thick, falling snow, dark shapes began appearing along the horizon. The army of the dead had finally arrived. The sight stole the breath right out of every living soul who saw it. The army stretched out farther than any eye could possibly see. Millions of undead soldiers filled the landscape from one horizon to the other. Countless glowing blue eyes shone through the blizzard like stars scattered across a dark sky. At the very center of the storm stood the Night King, riding on the back of the undead dragon Viserion. All around him marched his White Walkers. Silence gripped the entire city. Then the bells began ringing. Every single bell in King's Landing rang out at the exact same time. The final battle for all of Westeros had begun. The defenders quickly took their positions. Archers lined up along the walls. Unsullied soldiers formed tight ranks in front of the gates. Northern warriors stood shoulder to shoulder beside Lannister soldiers who had once been their sworn enemies. Above them, Drogon and Rhaegal circled through the heavy storm clouds. For perhaps the first time in all of history, nearly every living person in Westeros stood united against one single enemy. The Night King raised his hand high into the air. The dead charged forward. The battlefield exploded into complete chaos. Waves of undead crashed against the city's defenses like a living tsunami crashing onto a shore. Arrows darkened the entire sky above. Catapults hurled flaming rocks deep into the advancing army. Whole sections of the battlefield erupted in bright green wildfire explosions. Thousands of whites were destroyed in an instant. But thousands more kept coming. The dead climbed right over their own burning bodies without slowing down. They piled themselves up against the walls, forming grim mounds. Some used their own bodies as bridges to help others climb over. No matter how many fell, more always came to replace them. Above the city, bright dragon fire lit up the darkness of the storm. Daenerys and Jon unleashed huge streams of flame down onto the battlefield below. Whole sections of the undead army disappeared beneath the roaring fire. For one brief moment, hope returned to the defenders. Then the sky itself seemed to explode. Viserion burst out from within the storm clouds. Bright blue flames erupted across the entire sky. The undead dragon slammed into Regal with terrible, crushing force. The two massive beasts collided high above King's Landing, shaking the clouds with their furious roars. Citizens down below watched in horror as one dragon fought against another right over their heads. Jon chased after Viserion while Daenerys fought desperately to help and support him. The battle raged wildly across the stormy skies. Fire met ice again and again. Sharp claws tore through thick scales. Blood rained down onto the city below them. Then disaster struck. Viserion's frozen jaws suddenly clamped down around Regal's neck. With a horrifying, sickening crack, the dragon's neck snapped completely. Regal screamed in pain. The terrible sound echoed loudly across all of King's Landing. Then he fell from the sky. The dying dragon crashed directly into the city's walls below. Towers collapsed instantly. Thousands of defenders were crushed beneath the falling rubble. A massive section of the wall crumbled apart, creating a huge breach large enough for the dead to pour through. The Night King had finally found his opening. The army of the dead poured into King's Landing through the broken wall. Street fighting erupted immediately across the whole city. Every road became its own battlefield. Every building turned into a small fortress. Soldiers fought desperately to protect the frightened civilians around them. Men and women who had never held a weapon before in their lives joined the desperate struggle. Yet every single death only created another enemy soldier. Every fallen defender rose back up again just moments later. Panic completely consumed the city. The dead spread through King's Landing much faster than anyone could have imagined. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei finally understood the terrible truth. She had waited far too long to act. The war was already lost. As chaos consumed the whole city, Tyrion raced desperately through the collapsing streets, searching for any survivors he could find. Sansa led groups of frightened civilians toward the harbor for safety. Davos worked to organize evacuations onto every ship that was still available. Daenerys kept burning paths through the endless undead, trying desperately to buy her people more time. Then came the final, terrible catastrophe. The wildfire caches hidden deep beneath the city suddenly ignited. One explosion triggered another explosion. Then another and another. Bright green fire erupted violently beneath King's Landing. Entire districts of the city vanished within seconds. The whole city shook violently as towers collapsed and streets split apart beneath people's feet. Thousands of undead soldiers were consumed instantly by the flames. Thousands of living people died alongside them in the same fire. From out in the harbor, survivors watched in horror as the capital of all Westeros burned to the ground. The Iron Throne. The Red Keep. The great city that had ruled the Seven Kingdoms for hundreds of years. All of it disappeared beneath the fire and total destruction. Cersei Lannister never escaped the city. The Queen died buried within the collapsing Red Keep, trapped beneath the very kingdom she had fought so hard to rule over. As dawn slowly approached, the surviving fleets finally set sail and departed. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, Davos, Arya, and the very last defenders of humanity sailed east across the narrow sea. Behind them, King's Landing continued to burn. Ahead of them lay nothing but uncertainty. Standing atop the smoking ruins of the Red Keep, surrounded by millions of undead soldiers, the Night King looked out calmly across Blackwater Bay. The last survivors of humanity were escaping. For now. But Westeros truly belonged to him now. The entire continent of men had fallen. And the long night was only just beginning.